what's so wonderful about courage is that, what we see from like the icons that we look up to in mythology, whether it's on screen or throughout history, it's that fear always exists, but it's the courage ones who feel fear, but then go in that direction anyway. And so for me, it was really tackling the topic of nutrition and health for people. I was not a medical doctor. I didn't go down the path of academia, but I felt really entitled for answers for myself and for my family. But then I started to put out work in it, and I felt really empowered that I was living in a time where I was able to do that. And I could have said to myself, "Who am I? I'm not a medical doctor.
Right.
I don't have the sort of formal education, but I know that I'm really passionate, and I know that I'm." Intellectually, I have certain faculties that might predispose me to being good at what it is that I aspire to do. And I just went in that direction.
We're going to be doing something a little bit different. This is a live podcast, and it will be. It's not live streaming, but we're doing it obviously live, and then we're going to upload it. But what I thought would be really interesting was if I got a few of my close friends who have been extremely bold in their life and really kind of talk about what they think bold is, what I think bold is, and kind of how they've kind of used boldness in their careers, in their personal life to kind of build the platforms they have, and how you guys around here and listening when they listen, how they can harness their boldness skills. So basically, it's going to be a bold conversation with, like I said, three great friends. First up is, I just say sex with Emily. She's like Madonna, That's how I say. I don't even know her last name really. I do, but I never ever call her that. So Emily, not obviously, but for those of you who don't know, Emily is not only an expert, a connoisseur, but probably the best in her field in sex education, what's
sex educator, sex therapist, yeah. I love getting people to feel comfortable talking about sex and relationships and pleasure in a way that's not awkward and makes us all feel good.
Speaking of awkward, my two kids are in the audience, so let's just be careful of maybe use some different wording sometimes, but just be mindful of that. Euphemisms, exactly. And then we have Darin Olien, who is everything wellness. He is a superfood hunter. He is the host of Down to Earth with Zac Efron, 2 seasons already, an Emmy Award winner. He is exceptionally knowledgeable on so many different things. I don't even know how to even pigeonhole these people because they've created such a niche for themselves. But we're going to hear from Darin. Darin, how would you describe yourself? What would you say in one?
That was great.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, thank you. But if I wasn't saying it, what would be your title? If you just met somebody, what would be your elevator pitch? What would you say that you were?
Escalator pitch as I was coming up.
Yeah.
I'm curious, that's for sure. Curious about bettering the gnarly systems that we have going on in the environment. Certainly interested in continuing the documentary docuseries world, working on more books about...
Oh, tell them about that. So you have one book called Super Life, which is a huge New York Times bestseller.
Yep, this one.
Yeah, it just so happens to be here.
It is
beside him. And he just finished his second book that is called
Fatal Conveniences,
which is going to be massive, and we're going to talk about that. Okay. So he's obviously also an author, and we'll talk more about you in a moment. I wanted to move it on to the third person, which is Max Lugavere, who is just super smart, and he's all about brain health. And actually, he'll tell you his whole story, how he kind of evolved. His brand is called Genius or Genius Foods. Was that enough to say?
Yeah, it was a fair statement.
A fair statement. And he's just exceptionally knowledgeable about wellness, health, overall health. Very articulate. You're going to hear in 2 seconds. So this is the panel, you guys. And like I said, thank you, all of you, for being here tonight and supporting me and this book. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
We're so proud of you.
Yeah, we're so proud of you, Jen. Look at all these people.
You're gonna make me blush. So now I want to, so let's start on that lovely note. Great segue.
Does everyone know about your book, though? Have you talked about it yet on your podcast?
I've been talking about
better,
it.
Bolder, live the life you want, not the life you get.
Yes, thank you. That's cool. Exactly. The book is called Bigger, Better, Bolder, and we're going to talk. Let's start. So let me ask all three of you, what does boldness mean to you? Who wants to start? Emily? Sorry. I'll ask Max if you want first.
Max.
Okay, Max is okay, go ahead, Max. What is boldness to you?
Oh my God. I think it's just it's like it's learning how to hone your own internal compass and to go boldly in that direction. I use the word in a sentence. Is that okay?
That's good.
And to go in that direction and to be and to not necessarily be fearless. I think what's so wonderful about courage is that, what we see from like the icons that we look up to in mythology, whether it's on screen or throughout history, it's that fear always exists, but it's the courage ones who feel fear, but then go in that direction anyway. And so for me, it was really tackling the topic of nutrition and health for people. I was not a medical doctor. I didn't go down the path of academia, but I felt really entitled for answers for myself and for my family, which we can talk about why. But then I started to put out work, and I felt really empowered that I was living in a time where I was able to do that. And I could have said to myself, "Who am I? I'm not a medical doctor.
Right.
I don't have the sort of formal education, but I know that I'm really passionate, and I know that I'm, intellectually I have certain faculties that might predispose me to being good at what it is that I aspire to do." And I just went in that direction.
Boldly.
Yeah.
Because you were at Current TV doing something different, or were you kind of reporting on?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a very interesting career. I've never had a resume. So upon graduating college, I got a job working for Al Gore on TV. So I was put on TV post-graduation, anchoring, and that's when we met, anchoring a TV network that Al Gore owned. And so I was sort of like a journalist, producer, host, or whatever, and I was like in my early 20s, and I did that for 6 or 7 years. And sometime after that, I was at this point in my life where I both had trouble finding another job that I really felt passionate about, and my mom got sick. And that was really the turning point for me. It was the diagnosis of a form of dementia that my mom had incurred, and that really kind of set me off on a completely different path than I ever would have thought I'd have had gone down in my life.
It's interesting what you just said. It's interesting because I know you, but everyone always asks you very much about Alzheimer's and brain health, and now about all these other nutritional things. It's interesting because you were super bold because, like you said, you don't have a medical background, but you had a lot of passion and interest because of your mom in that direction, and you just kind of you didn't think about it, you just went for it because it was something that innately you were really interested in doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a realist, and I'm a very self-aware person. I regularly take stock and take inventory of my own faculties, and I've tried a bunch of different. I've tried a lot of different things in my life, and I've failed at a lot of different things.
Where did you fail at?
Well, I'm super passionate, for one, about music, and there was a point where I tried to see. I'm not going to say I tried to make it, but I definitely tried to see if I had the chops to ascend in the music world as like a singer-songwriter, which is something that I really wanted to do.
No way.
You knew this. Yeah.
No, I knew you played guitar, but I thought you just did it at your house with girls. I didn't know you did this for
Girls
girls.
love the guitar.
Yeah, that's what I thought you did. Yes.
That's not false. But no, I did. There was a point I was making use of the fact that I taking advantage of the fact that I lived in LA, and I tried to do it. And I realized, very early on that there are people that are doing this for whom there is no plan B, that are doing this from the moment they are able to learn to play an instrument. They're doing it from childhood, and that wasn't my thing. That I wasn't meant to do that. But then I realized at a certain point that I was a fairly intelligent person. I was a good communicator, proven by this incredible job that I had on TV, that I was comfortable in front of the camera, that I had an aptitude for understanding and assimilating research, that I was like really interested in this, that my brain is, we talked about this on my podcast, that my brain is like a light switch. Like when I'm interested in something, there's no stopping me in terms of like the depth that I'll go.
But you retain information and like really well. And then you can like...
I have a very selective photographic memory. I don't know shit about like the vast majority of topics. Like I don't know anything about most things. but I have a photographic memory for the things that I'm really interested in. So it's like either, which are, by the way, three things. One is like cinema, music, and health. So.
Well, it worked out for you.
Yeah, it suits me really well.
Right?
Yeah.
Really well.
Yeah.
And so how about you, darling Darin? What is boldness to you, and how have you been bold in your life?
I mean, that's a big one. It's really hard to kind of grok it, but I think it's definitely in the vein of what Max said, in the sense that in spite of your monkey mind saying whatever, and even in spite of the world giving you any sort of feedback, that you have this inner feeling and this inner sense, and you wrestle with that, and then you ultimately listen, hear it, and then take a step in spite of everything else. And so I think that, and cultivating that, by the way, still cultivate it every day, because it's way too distracting out here, and it blasts us every day. So I think cultivating boldness is a practice, and it is a muscle.
Sounds familiar. I wonder who else said
Yeah. And I think maybe there's people that insecurity can create a massive amount of boldness, which is a superpower, right? Because you have to understand, like, from my perspective, this yin and yang, this light and dark of this world, this tragedy and happiness, they equally exist. So the one hand, pain and suffering and challenges are the propeller creating from your mom's challenges into like what I want to create. So it is the propeller, and our feeble little minds barely grasp it, but in the reflection of trying to grasp it, I come to realize that it is a gift telling me and showing me the next step. And so it's like, I lost my house in 2018, lost everything I owned except a suitcase and the car that I drove to the airport. And luckily my dogs were away. And you can't possibly understand that. You can't possibly get your head around that. However, through the grief and understanding, I realized that one of the greatest gifts of my life, and there's no way I would change it. Do I want that for anyone? Fuck no, right?
I mean, fudge, no.
Fudge.
Oh, this is going to be hard.
It's going to be... So that...
Poor Emily, she's next. Oh, God.
Yeah, it's not all dirty.
I opened up the door, sorry. So I think, and I'll step on the next step of the start of most of my career with the superfood hunting thing. That was when I lost my father in 2004, and I was playing around. I had physiology background, nutrition background, and I was playing around and looking at supplements and looking at, why are people doing this? And there's some shitty... Sorry, damn.
No, you can say that. You can say that.
There's some not good things in products and foods and everything else. And so I said, my dad passed away, and I got just 15 grand from whatever was left in his will. And I started my company, and I said, I need to actually do something with what I'm playing around with. And so that started me literally. I'm a small town kid from Minnesota. Like, there's no part of me that would have thought I'd end up in the Amazon looking for medicinal plants. And I literally did it innocently. And I was just like, I gotta know what these things are. I gotta know what's in here. I gotta know who's creating it. I gotta know where it's from.
It's curiosity then.
Curiosity. And so...
And same with you, curiosity.
Yeah. And through the pain my dad passed away. What am I going to do? Quit messing around. Just jump into something and do it. And then through that doing, I got basically a phone call serendipitously from Beachbody, and I created one of their largest selling products
of all time.
Of all time. And
Shakeology, by the way, for those of you who don't know.
So I started that in 2006, and it launched in 2008. And, it's like, can you make this shake for us? I'm like, sure. Like, I was playing around with this stuff, and I just said yes.
It's unbelievable.
And so, it's like, again, I think the being bold in the face of fear, in the face of challenge, in the face of, again, cultivating that inner kind of work to realize what's the propeller that's operating in me that wants to show me something, and then in spite of family and people and friends, I'm gonna freaking do it anyway, right? And that's the bold step.
I love that. So like curiosity is more or less the gateway to opportunity and being bold, because we all had it, right? That's what it really was. You were curious and you didn't let things deter you from pushing forward and acting.
Yeah, in order to get to that curiosity, you have to kind of, clear some debris, right? You have to clear some understanding of yourself to realize like this creative curiosity is just, it's now got me. It's got me so involved. I have to learn more. I have to dig in.
Okay, Em.
All right.
You're up.
Bold. Well, I think it's interesting what everyone said here so far, that I think that when I think of the finding like the spark and finding that thing in your life that you just have to learn more about, and that you're so curious about, what you talk so much about in your book, that is the thing, that boldness is a skill. And a lot of that, which I think was so fascinating in your book too, because I've actually reading going, Pop, I'm sorry.
No, you can say
some places I'm so bold and all the things I've done are really bold, but that it's like in these little places, sometimes I'm like, oh, I could work on that skill, asking for what I want even more and going after all those things. But for me, bold, when I think about it now after this, it's going through really not being afraid of taking risks, but also knowing that it's when that spark happens that you know that there's something that you have to do. And that's how I kind of felt about my field when I realized that that this was 18 years ago now, but really there was no sex education out there. There wasn't a lot of information. It was before I did start a podcast 18 years ago, believe it or not. There were podcasts. There was like 3 of us. And
was there really just, hold on, who was?
2005. No, I mean, there was more.
No, besides Dr. Ruth at the time, and Dr. Joyce Brothers, who else was doing that?
So when I went to talk about sex in 2005, I realized I was always I loved reading in your book. It's so Jen, like she was like 5 years old and peppering all of her mom's friends about like, where do you live? Do you live in a house? How much did you pay? Tell me about your relationship.
How much money did you make?
I was like, really? I'm like, but that's what Jen already does. And that's why. But it's so infectious because she does it in such a loving way. When you get to be a friend of Jen, it's such a loving thing. And she's actually asking because she's curious, but then she can kind of using your skill set to kind of help and support, and you're a very loyal friend and all the things.
Aww.
But in reading that, I was reminded that I really was like that from a young age too, around sex. I would ask people about, not just sex, but I would meet a couple and I'd say, how'd you meet? How'd you fall in love? And I was like 5 or 6 or 8 or 10. I'd always been really interested in like romance and love and what makes a happy couple, what makes an unhappy couple. And granted, my parents, side note, like probably no surprise, they were divorced. So that's kind of led up to it. But I was like, oh, so some couples work how? So I always had a lot of questions and I was always very, very curious. But then as I got older, I realized like sex was happening. So I was a sexual being. And I realized it was really only Dr. Ruth. So 18 years ago, she was probably the only person. There was not, you couldn't really Google it. It wasn't really on the internet. There was a few books. And so what I realized is I wasn't really armed with the knowledge about having, like I thought it was good, but I'm like, could it be a lot better than this? Because no one's talking about it. No one else having sex was talking about it. Either you had sex or you didn't have sex, and maybe it was good or bad. But even when people would say, I had great sex last night, I used to like stop them in their tracks and be like, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by good sex? And I would literally say, like, back up. Like, good why? Like, did you have 18 orgasms? Sorry. I can do this, whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
Listen,
Linda, take my kids.
It's
I would like
2023.
break it down. I would break it down. I'd be like, what do you mean? Because I don't understand. There's no barometer. Who tells you what's good and bad? And so there wasn't information. So I believe that for me, realizing.
How about Loveline? Were they around?
Loveline was around.
Okay.
So
Who did Loveline? Adam
Dr.
Carolla?
Drew and Adam Carolla, which, yes. And that was the only show that was out there. They were answering questions with people calling in.
I grew up on that show. I was like obsessed with
right.
that show.
It was such a good show. Right. We didn't have it in San Francisco at the time, but it was before podcast. But when I moved here, actually, that was the one show that I could point to that was doing it, and then I was actually on it the last 4 years with Dr. Drew, like hosting it, which was a wonderful moment in my.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. Look at all these.
Oh my
things.
God,
You
I'm going
never
to
asked
learn
me
all
that.
these things. Okay.
So the point is, like, for me, being bold it was just about I felt that there was. It almost became this passion, like you were both saying, like you have to find that spark in your life. And I know we won't be the first person to tell you that, but I could not ask. Like I was like, I can't believe that no one's telling us. Kids are growing up and go out in the world, they've been having sex and there's zero information. This has got to stop. So I did everything I could to educate myself, and then I went back to school, got my doctorate. And again, at the time, like talking about it was like that, no one think that's a good idea. I came from a career in politics, and my mom would be like, you have a really great career. Like, what are you doing, you know?
Right, because you were doing politics in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how did you then like make the shift? Like that's a huge pivot, right?
It was a pivot. I kept pivoting. So my thing, if anyone here is like, I don't know what I want to do yet. Like this was my second career at like 35. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. But I knew when I was no longer passionate, I cannot fake it. So like the light bulb moment in your brain, like my light bulb, it goes out. Like I can be really passionate, and then when I'm not, I'm like, well, I will not be useful to anybody unless I constantly love what I'm doing, and I'm passionate and I'm asking questions all the time, and that's what keeps me going. That is the fuel. So I was doing politics, but then I became really disillusioned by it because I was like, oh, it's all about fundraising, and that is not fun. I thought it was about, making a difference in the world. So I realized at the time, I was like, I really want the right people to get elected, but then you got to, do the money things, and that wasn't fun. But then I made a documentary about politics, and I realized from there, I actually loved the process of getting people to open up, and I turned that into a podcast.
Was there like a lot of so that was the first thing then? You went to school for it first, or you did the podcast first?
Well, I started the podcast, and I was not an expert in the field at all. I was like, well, I had some hands-on experience, but I was not.
Did you ever?
I did not have.
I'm just kidding.
I didn't have. Thanks, Jen. I had I didn't have a degree, and I read everything I get my hands on. And I was just talking. I read hundreds of books. I asked everyone at nauseam, grilled them really about their sex life, but no. But then I think about 3 years into the podcast, people started asking me for advice. And although I had a lot of therapy and read a lot of books, I was like, I'm going to go back to school and get my doctorate. So I did that after I started the podcast. And that was 12 years ago, I got the doctorate.
You know what I find so interesting? That the people who become the most successful in in their area, like you, like Max and you, Darin and you, Emily, you didn't have the wherewithal. You were very naive about how it would happen. And because of that, I say this, naivety is a strength, right? Because what you don't know doesn't stop you from going and trying something, right? So if you know too much information, you think about all the things why you shouldn't. You're not you don't have the experience, you don't have the talent, you don't have the wherewithal. But having none of it actually is how you become successful.
Yeah, I love that you flip all that, the two about also in your book about being mediocre. I'm like, that's awesome. You're right. That has been a skill set. Right. Feeling like that has been a strength. Right? Not being
Tell
the
me
best.
About it.
I wasn't one of the all A students in school. I was very mediocre. But I wanted to figure out what else I wanted to do. So yeah, I mean, you just.
But you had that you had that interest.
Yeah. And I knew that I also, being someone whose focus is a challenge, I knew that if I'm not completely into something, I'm out. And when you lose my attention, when out. But something about sex is and relationships and dating and love, and it's not all sex, but that's endless. Think about it. It's there's so much to unpack about other people, educating people, but also my own life. It's just, it's like health. You're never done learning about health.
It's still health. It's sexual health.
Yeah, it's sexual health. We are all what? We are one.
So important.
Right, exactly. So then how come you think in your industry especially, there hasn't been that many thought leaders come out from it, even though it's becoming much more popular and people are talking about it more, and there's all these different versions of it, but still, you're still in the top tier.
I mean, I think that there's a lot of shame around it. I think there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of people who are still kind of trying to figure it out. And I think also, to be honest, a lot of people just think that and I think this is changing with a different, younger generation, but I think people believe that if you have to talk about sex or work on your sex life, that there's something like wrong with you, and that there's so much shame and embarrassment because we don't see it in our culture anywhere. That there's just, people are thinking like, I don't know my own stuff. How am I going to go out and figure it out? And I think there's not a lot of places to go. Like literally, there's not a lot of grad school. I mean, there's, again, starting now more so, but there was not a lot of places to go to learn more, maybe perhaps. But I hear from a lot of young people all the time who are getting into this field. So I think it's wonderful. But I think again, it's stress, trauma, shame, fear, religion. There's a lot of reasons I think why people don't venture into it. Even for themselves, even they don't even want to go inward and think of like, who am I as a sexual being? Like that's just off limits for many people too, because of unresolved challenges. Then society isn't actually backing you up, saying like, come on, let's learn. And like schools teach it for half a day, right? With your gym teacher. Like you think that's a cliche, but everyone's like, oh yeah, that was my gym teacher.
That was actually my gym. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, it was my gym teacher.
So what do they know? Like they just have a big gym. I guess you could all sit on the floor. I don't know why they did a gym teacher.
Does that happen though? Did you feel like you're getting asked more?
It's true.
That's true actually.
Half a day about like this thing that's like really, really important to
that's
understand.
true. Like I got taught on a VHS tape for like 2 hours or like, split into two by my gym teacher.
Right, exactly. And they're like, don't get pregnant, don't get an STD, have a nice life.
Yeah, and see ya.
Exactly.
And no, it's 100% true. Now that you say that, it's actually true.
Really, and then when you're young, you're told like, oh, it's this coveted thing that you're going to get to do when you're adult, and then you do it. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Was it like, I guess it's okay. You know, I think many people have that experience. Then no one else talks about it. So anyway, so it's bold just to even just be here and hear we talk about it now.
Exactly, it's very bold that you're actually. But the two of you men are sitting on the stage with Emily. You're very bold and very. I mean, to be doing this.
Let's keep going.
How are you going to?
This is great.
I told you I tried to introduce you guys like years ago. God. Anyway, not like that. I mean, like as friends. God, you guys, seriously. I didn't mean it like that. So how do you like? So let's go back to you, Darin. Okay. So segue into you. Where do you go from there? Tell us about
Where
some
do
bull.
we go from there?
I mean, I don't even know what to ask you from after that. Emily, that was so great. You're leading her. So
well, listen, I just like there is so much there, and I think just to make a comment on it, it's like the shame around sex and the dirtiness, just and the religious kind of connotations around it is just painted this horrible kind of situation. And so I applaud you for boldly going where very few people will go, Captain Kirk. So I'm dating myself, right?
No, you're not. I got it.
But so I mean, it's that again. That's kind of excavating oneself too, right?
Can I help you do it? But can I?
Go ahead, please.
I want to say something. Thinking, yes, we've all done really bold things, and I think a lot of people. But what I love, I wanted to bring it back to your book for a minute.
Oh, of course, she's such a good friend.
No, but I mean it because what I loved, I actually read it going, shit. I texted you last time, like I gotta be bolder because I'm bold every day. I do big bold things, but sometimes I self-doubt. I hold myself back. This is bold to say all of you. Like I'm bold, but I have a lot of maybe I don't do the 10 tries or whatever your 10%
target.
I'm like, I
read the book though. Good for you.
I did know, but like your target of like keep going. Like I think that what I love about your book is that it's like that boldness is a skill that you can cultivate, which I never thought about that way. Either you're born bold or you're not, and there are some ways you're bold, but there's other ways that really in thinking about getting what you want in life. And when you're even just the cover, you're like, don't live the life you get. And I'm like, oh God, what am I just accepting right now that I think as a friend, you do push me there sometimes. So I appreciate that. That bold is like I love that we were all doing cool things, but like day to day, sometimes I don't maybe always ask for things that I need like professionally, or I hold myself back in ways where I overthinking. What do you say? Like, yes. It's the overthinking is like the enemy of boldness.
It is. Well, I think when you're too smart, you tend to overthink things.
Right.
Because you think
but
of
I'm
all
also
the
mediocre and smart. I've realized, but I'm.
I mean, being mediocre is I told you, it's a superpower.
It is. No, but I love the bold tips in here.
Thank you. So then, what would you say? What kind of boldness? Where in your life, Max, would you have to say that you have to like work on your bold area? Because you could be bold in one area in your life and not so bold in another area. What would you say?
Well, jumping off what Emily
Everyone wants to talk about Emily. That's 16. No, it's good.
began to allude to. I think oftentimes we get in our own way, and for me, somebody who's like very creative, and even though my work focuses on health science and nutrition, like I very much consider myself an artist, and my work a sort of outgrowth of that of my artistic tendency. And I think like as an artist, you tend to be, I don't know if others in the audience feel this way, but I feel very like precious about like anything that I create. And that's like something that I've always felt. Like if I'm going to put something out into the world, it has to be amazing. It has to be something that I consider to be perfect. But when you're first getting started with any kind of creative endeavor, there is the tendency, of course, to let perfect be the enemy of the good. And as they say at Facebook, done is better than perfect. And so just, for example, with me and my podcast, which I launched in 2018, I never thought that, actually at the beginning when I launched it, I didn't think that I was any good as a host. I didn't think that it was going to be successful. I very much thought at the time that there were enough podcasts. Like what does the world need? Like another
one?
Yeah, another guy with a podcast. Like, and
apparently it did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I basically I followed like a formula, and it's not a formula that I discovered on any website or any hidden like back channel. It was just like consistency, and it was about not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, and just putting out the content and realizing that with the process comes eventually mastery. Whether or not you can see the end of the tunnel with whatever it is that you aspire to do, you're sort of like I think of it as being sort of like a miner in a coal mine. Like as long as you stay focused on like the chipping away of what's in front of you, there is an end. Even if you can't see it. Like for me, I never would have predicted that I would have written a book, let alone a book that would go on to become like a global, New York Times bestseller, anything like that.
Genius Foods was the first one. What was the first
Yeah.
one? Was it Genius Foods?
Genius Foods was the first one.
That was massive. So
Yeah.
I'm not even just saying that because to be polite. If you haven't read it, it's amazing. That's when I first met you.
Yeah, that was the first book.
Yeah, and the second one?
The Genius Life, which came out March 2020,
Yeah.
which was
God.
not the best time to put out a book. So yeah, it's sort of the middle child, and then and I love it nonetheless.
And look over there.
And then this is the third book that came out this year called Genius Kitchen, which is a cookbook. But yeah, I never would have thought, ever would have anticipated that this would be my career, because what I've always been focused on, I don't know if it was like something that was just intuitively that I knew to do, but I just stayed focused on like the chipping away of what was like immediately in front of me.
But you also knew, I remember like, let's talk about like the social media part and digital and all that, because you had to kind of evolve and grow these businesses. So even if that was your world, you had to become well known in social media. And you kind of grew pretty fast, right? Like
on social media?
Yeah.
Yeah, everything kind of grew separately but in tandem. For the social media thing for me, there was something that clicked for me with social media where I completely relinquished the desire to appear cool on social media. And
you had an opinion. You have an opinion on there too.
Yeah, but it wasn't even about expressing my opinion. I became solely focused on adding value. That's it. And like putting out free content. Because I knew that I would eventually grow a following and that I'd be able to do something with that following. But I think when I first got on social media, I aspired to just like look cool and look like a guy who's like doing cool things. And at a certain point, I just like that completely went out the window. And I started thinking in terms of how can I create content that is going to create value for whoever gives an F about what I have to say. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And the minute that clicked in my brain, it was like night and day. It was like a switch. And my following started to grow like really quickly after that.
Yeah, and now I feel like you picked a lane, so to speak, right? Like people know when they go to you what to expect.
Yeah.
Right. Same with you, Emily. Like they know what to get when they know what they're going to get when they come to you. So you're very deliberate.
Same thing. I want to provide value, and yeah, Max. Maybe I go to his Instagram, like I want to eat broccoli now. I want a celery or eggs.
The steak.
His face in the steak. I'm like, okay, I'll eat that. I'll do that. I love
meat.
that. It was very or meat, whatever it was, grass fed.
And broccoli sprout. Yeah,
Broccoli
I
too,
just
yes,
love it. No, I
fine.
love
All
when
the
you're
things.
pivoted. Yeah, it was good, Max. It was good. So for me, very specific. I want people to. But it's been a lot of road to figure out what works. And like for a while, I didn't like if I post a picture of me. Like everyone's like, pictures of you do great. I'm like, yeah, but it's not. It's not about me. And like that was early, a few years ago. I was like, I really want people. That was a separate thing. It's like I really didn't want it to be about me per se. It was like even though it's Sex with Emily in the title, I think that if it could help people listening to my voice and the podcast and all that, but if you're like thinking about social media, it's like I definitely want every post to educational, every podcast. I want people to take something away from it. And to learn action items, actionable.
Yeah. And same with you. So like Darin, you kind of went from being the superfood hunter to then like having like a major show on Netflix and now this new, can I talk about the new show? No?
No.
Oh.
Well,
Okay.
there is a new show. We just can't talk about.
Oh, okay. Well,
We can't give any details.
any information. Okay, well, it's going to be huge. Okay, I'm telling you now. But you really made like, and you got into all this other stuff. Like, how did you go so deep into the weeds with like this new book coming out and all of that stuff? You became like very much like the spokesman for things that are, well, you can
Harmful.
talk helpful, yeah,
Harmful.
and helpful.
So this second book is called Fatal Conveniences. We're all holding one of them right now, and that's the phone, right? So they're so great, they're so convenient, but they all have a little rub, right? You put that up to your head, the electromagnetic fields, which, by the way, in the fine print, I'm not going to go too much in this. Thing.
Get comfortable.
But the fine
Get a
print
quilt.
says it should not be closer than 9 inches to your body, and everyone's got it in their bras or their pockets, and it's very clear, and then I'll just leave it.
Thanks for
Very
that.
clear that it turns on reactive oxygen species, so it's a free radical igniter. It suppresses the immune system, and it creates a whole lot of response and of neutering in the reproductive system. So it's a really bad thing. And again, so there's things, so the whole book is not about just to poo-poo everything, because
my
believe
phone.
me,
Well,
just
the
put
whole,
this over here.
so why I got into that was, again, there's like safe sleep, right? There's things you can do for it. But my father suffered, he was part of the Naval Academy or the Naval Fleet in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he worked on atomic bombs, and he got exposed to a lot of radiation. And so his immune system was shot. So by the time I could realize, like, he was taking thyroid medication, and then in the 90s, he developed chemical sensitivity. So his immune system couldn't deal with normal stuff, like deodorants and shampoos. And so I was in college, so he's sending me these care packages. Hey, you're coming home this weekend. You need to shower with this. You need to put this deodorant on. And I was like, what the fuck? Is this in his head? Like, and so he was a professor. So he was very, making VHS tapes, trying to educate his whole world around him. And then the more I realized, I started looking into it. So it affected me then. So the book is dedicated to him. And I just kept pulling those strings. And the thing is, it's all out in the open. I'm not making this up. It's like cosmetics and personal care items. There is
AirPods, like you were talking about your phone,
yeah,
right?
the
It's like
Bluetooth.
You would never wear.
Never.
And
ever.
like this guy is like this guy. He practices what he preaches. He's not just saying it from like he. It is 100%. You like live and breathe everything that you talk about.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, it's not to be overwhelmed. There's always a better solution, right?
What is a better solution for the phone? Like I think the AirPods and the phone, because everyone here uses it.
I never ever put your phone up to your head, ever.
How about the AirPods though?
There's Bluetooth. I would never put those in your ear canals and just sit there, because that's just it's a lower voltage of the same frequency of the cell phone, right? And it already shows that it's dangerous. So you can use air tubes for your, you can plug it back in. So I was
Just
like
the
hashtag plug everything back in.
Everything,
right?
so like the ones that I would,
Just plug everything back in. And just if you use a speakerphone, if you're alone, just use a speakerphone and don't. So there's always a solution for this stuff.
Can you give us one other one that's very...
Dental floss.
Really?
Yeah, so dental floss, that damn stuff that's so slippery and it fits between the teeth really well. The thin film, and it's like so that shit is PFAS. So it's the grandfather of PFAS is Teflon. So DuPont made that so it slips in between your teeth, and it is a proven carcinogenic.
Really?
To your kidney.
All
kidneys.
dental floss? Or is there other good
Wax?
organic dental floss?
Is it the wax one?
I mean,
you're
you
talking
can
about?
you can bamboo and charcoal and wax, and you can get
Those are
do
the
your
one,
due
yeah.
diligence on that stuff. But any of that shit that's like, again, it's a hell of a convenience, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't you mess up your gums and everything else. But like for me, I use a regular one. I just wet it first, and I'm like, it's
A
good.
regular one? What do you mean a
Yeah,
regular
just so
one?
so a nice clean one that doesn't have that PFAS on it. I just wet it first, and then it slips in between the
And it's
teeth.
good?
Just use a dry floss.
Yeah, it's just a dry floss. So
Sounds so creepy.
And then you
you should see her face.
I feel like I'd rather get the kidney cancer.
She's like,
Oh my God.
like
Okay, so give us one other one more. I think that's why I think this book is going to be so massive, because I think everyone is fascinated by
the
it.
good news is there's just great products that you can replace this.
Give
stuff
us one
with.
more. Your book can't just be two.
Well,
pamphlet,
clothing.
Okay.
Clothing, like most of it is in synthetic fiber and petroleum, so you're wearing oil, right? Formaldehydes, phthalates are all endocrine disruptors. So if you look at all of this stuff, they're doing three major things. Again, they're neutering you. Again, and you got to think about your children. Okay, like here's another one that I would say: never put throwaway diapers on a child, ever, because that's around their private parts. And
the diapers.
Exactly, right?
and it's very clear that it's affecting their hormonal system immediately. Plus, the big rub is 200 known chemicals, most of which are carcinogenic, are already in the umbilical cord of every mother giving birth today in the United States.
Really?
So all of this stuff, from the paints to the carpets to the sprays that make the room smell good, all of this stuff is absolutely gnarly. So my point to this whole thing is, you may not feel you're suffering, but you're suffering. You're in it, your body's being exposed to it, and over time you're like, why do I have a headache? Why do I not have the energy? Where is my testosterone, right? You go to these biohack conferences, everyone's talking about testosterone. They're running around with freaking weird-ass clothes and tight clothes and Bluetooth and monitoring devices, and I'm like going, oh my God. And then they're like, yeah, I just got my testosterone checked. I'm like, oh my God, you guys are crazy. So I think it's an elephant in the room in our society. It's an elephant in the room in our, listen, 2.7% of the United States are deemed healthy by the Mayo Clinic. 2.7% of all people are actually deemed healthy. So we are sprinting towards our own demise. These things, the point to this whole thing is to expose these systems that we have in place that we're apathetic towards. I want to just shake you a little bit to go like, oh, I can still floss my teeth. I just don't need to put chemicals in my mouth and be absorbed by my body or my children and also toothpaste, right? So
Okay.
like kids and toothpaste and fluorides and like.
So what do you use instead of? So what kind of tooth? Oh, so you can use.
I use this stuff called Bite.
Oh, Bite, that's what-
Bite
yeah.
toothpaste, which
Right.
is great. It's just little pellets. And it's clean and.
And I know that he doesn't honestly, he's super particular with every single company he works with, because I work with him and he won't work with anybody, and it's serious. Well, it's serious that like you're very serious.
And it's
about
just it's just over time.
Yeah.
Right. You just do this over time, so you don't get overwhelmed with it. You just take one step at a time.
And you're boldly putting it out there to the world.
It sucks with the creative stuff like this. You have no idea. I'm talking to the publisher, going, "You sure you want that title? You sure you want Fatal Convenience? Yeah, we love it. You sure? I don't know if anyone's gonna want to look at this stuff."
What do you mean? Everyone loves that
Well,
stuff.
but that's the thing. Anything creative, even the TV shows that come out, you're going, "Oh, fuck, they edited that out. This shows it's gonna suck." I said all this stuff. They cut all that out. You're like, I don't know.
Do they cut it out because they don't want to kind of cause like
It's
a
a million
kerfuffle?
reasons. You have no idea. And so it's like with any book, you put it out there and you just go, okay, I just got to keep going. I just put it out and I just got to keep going and just take it however it goes. And that's life, man. It's like, anything happens in life. It's like have the conversation with your partner about sex if it sucks. Like have those radical, honest conversations. That's bold. Everyone's avoiding direct eye communication conversations. It's a plague. That's the freaking pandemic, right? We need to interact, look at each other, be honest and open and caring, but honest, truly, right? So we can have real conversations. That's what I love about you. Like there's no bullshit, right? It's just that's Jennifer, and then she creates a space because she again going back to her book, she is this book, and I don't care if you feel you're successful or know what you want to do, you're going to gain and garner something from this book. Just like Emily, right? You go through this thing going, oh my God, I totally failed today, right? Or on any moment, right? Where I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Yeah. And I'm like, do it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and it's a practice too. Like what I loved is how real you were too, though, at the end of your book, because you're talking about the Mark Wahlberg thing. You're like, you saw him somewhere and you're like, have gone up there and been bold.
I still think about that. Rejection over regret. I mean,
right, but
I'd
just
rather
stop
be
yourself in
rejected
the moment.
than regret, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, what else am I going to do? Like, what is the worst? You have to think, what's the worst thing that can happen?
What's the worst that can happen?
And the worst thing that happens, and then I was also reading somewhere that like some study about like most people, maybe it was in your book, that most people they do, like you said, when you regret the shots you don't take, I guess that's part of it, but like people on their deathbed are literally saying like, I just regret that I didn't do these things, not what they did. They're like, I can't believe I made that phone call and asked for that, whatever it is, that raise or that person to call me or that person to talk to me or I made that move. It's more about like beating yourself up for not doing things. So
right.
like
she's referring to something
bold.
that, thank you, because she's referring to this thing I always talk about, rejection versus regret. And I'd always rather be rejected versus having regret, because rejection, you feel it and it hurts, but then it kind of fades away after a while. And regret, that lives with you all the time. And so I always pick rejection over regret anytime.
And rejection you can learn from.
And you can learn from,
right.
And also a lot of times with that rejection comes another thing that you never even knew existed by just, but you don't know that at the time, but it shows itself later on down the road.
And you realize how often you keep yourself safe because you don't want to feel rejection. But then you realize, like, the more you do it, like, really, what is the worst? So you got rejected. Like,
exactly.
You asked, though.
What's the worst that can happen?
And then it's a muscle.
Have you ever been rejected, Max?
Never.
Yeah.
No. A bajillion times, yeah. I'm actually in the process right now of
being rejected?
Of being rejected, yeah.
See you, Max.
No, all the time. I mean, that's part of the reason why I decided to build my own, empire, so to speak, because I came through the Hollywood system, and then when my job ran its course, the Al Gore network thing, and I tried to leverage that job into a career, I found myself like being thrown against brick walls over and over and over again. I signed with like a major agency, and it ended up not working out. Like none of the jobs that they put me up for was I booking. They ended up dropping me. It was actually like that saying, like when life falls apart. That moment for me, there was a year where like my agent dropped me. I wasn't making any money. I felt like I had deferred, like my young adult, like the young adult, like what am I doing with my life thing? Because I had that job, but I wasn't able to transition it to a career. And then my mom got sick. So for me, I mean, that was like the lowest of the low that I've ever experienced in my life. I mean, it was a pretty dark time, but yeah, but from that, like, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about hitting rock bottom. So there's only, you can only go up from there, right?
That's true.
So yeah, so that was it. And even right now, like, I mean, with all the things that I've...
This is rock bottom for you?
No, now is not rock bottom. I'm very grateful, but I'm still getting rejected. Like one of the projects that I'm working on that I'm really excited about is a documentary that I've been working on for 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been this like labor of love. Lots of rejection over the course of 8 years to get it done, and like a major pain project. I did a Kickstarter campaign for it 8 years ago, and the backers are like, "When's this film coming out? Did you just take all the money and like use it to fund your lifestyle, you fraud?" Like,
oh my God!
Like a very small, tiny proportion of the 1,800 people that contributed to it are like really evil. And these people contributed like the least.
Of course, always that way.
There's like a
Always
$5 donor to the Kickstarter campaign 8 years ago. They're like, you're like really, really terrible. And those are the kinds of comments that I have to
my gosh.
But it's fine. It's fine. I've got this amazing project. I'm super excited about it.
You can take $5. I'll give you $5 for the Kickstarter.
I can't even refund them because half of their credit cards are like not active anymore.
Seriously?
So, yeah. You can like in the Kickstarter thing. Yeah, you can go and refund backers, but only if their credit cards are active. Otherwise, you have to like reach out to them, which I don't want to do.
Right.
So, but we're now in the process of. But it's fine. We've got this amazing film after 8 years, and we're in the process of submitting it to film festivals.
Nice.
It's my hope
that's
to
so good.
And thank you. But like, not every film festival is going to like accept it.
No,
so
it's okay.
it's just a.
Can you go back on Joe Rogan and talk about it?
Maybe.
He was on Joe Rogan.
He was
We're
on
very
Joe
proud
Rogan,
of Max.
and it was one of those most shared episodes. I saw that. I was so proud of you.
So proud.
Thank you.
Yeah, no,
When
you're
you-
welcome. It was
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's very big, and also because you're very articulate, and you're very good at getting some message that can be complicated out to like the layman's person, and so that's why I think I love your information and your content and you.
Thank you.
You're
No, you're so
welcome.
sweet. I'm obsessed with health and nutrition. Like, and I come at it from a place of, I mean, I think authenticity, because it really is motivated by the fact that my mom was sick, and I aspire to not suffer the same fate that my mom suffered, and to have, if I'm able to have any impact on others that I care about and the world at large, I mean, that to me would be a dream. And so for me, it really is about understanding as much as I possibly can, and then sharing that information out with people. And I've found this like interesting like zone for myself where I'm doing like all the things that I feel like I'm meant to do,
And you're so good at it.
Thanks, but it's taken, I get a lot of, well, I was going to ask the panel, like, how do you deal with naysayers? Because I mean, for me, the bigger you get in any area, right, you get hate, right? Like, and it's, I think, important to remember that there are freaking people that hate Disney World. There are people that hate pizza, like, there are going to be haters, right? As long as you're doing anything of note, like, there's going to be haters.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, even today, like even after Rogan and everything, all the positive feedback that I get, I still get a lot of like, I mean.
Are they hating you because you're eating meat? Because I know Darin hates you because of that.
No, well.
You eat meat?
Yeah, so occasionally.
Yeah. He's a major vegan, Darin, and Max is not.
But we respect each other.
But we love each other nonetheless. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's always interesting.
How do you handle it? Because you seem like a sensitive type a little bit, Like, how do you handle it? Do you not? You don't like it,
Well,
obviously.
I am sensitive, but I'm able to take my ego out of it because I have what Jordan Peterson calls a noble aim.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's something larger than myself that I do this work for, and I think it's really important for you to find that, whatever that happens to be. That's like a really important part of the puzzle.
I like that. Is there any? I think we got to wrap. Yeah, I got to wrap this up. They probably want us out of here, and I'm just droning on and on over here. But this has been very fun, and again, I'm so appreciative to all three of you guys for coming out here and supporting this book launch. And Can you guys just all quickly say how people can find you and all your stuff?
Yeah, so I'm Max Lugavere. I'm very active on Instagram, and I have a podcast called The Genius Life. So if you listen to podcasts, come over. We talk about fitness and nutrition. It's great.
It's in the top health in the world, like in the top 5 in the world all the time. So you should definitely listen. He's got great content. And the books.
Oh yeah, books. Genius Kitchen. They have a bunch of copies here. So check it out. What?
I love it. Being bold, you gotta be bold.
Yeah, you gotta be bold.
Yeah. Go ahead, Darin, your turn.
Darin Olien on all the platforms, darinolien.com, The Darin Olien Show, Super Life, and pre-order is The Fatal Convenience.
Already on pre-order?
Yeah,
already?
Yeah, it comes out May 15th.
Nice.
Wow, I'll order a copy.
Me too.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sex with Emily on all platforms, all social media. The podcast is Sex with Emily, sexwithemily.com. You can also pre-order my book. Like
Already?
Today, it's called Smart Sex. And it's called Smart Sex, How to Uplevel Your Sex IQ and Own Your Pleasure, because I've developed a whole new way of thinking about sex. It's called Sexual Intelligence. I release 2 podcasts a week. I've been heading into my 18th year. I have thousands of podcasts. If you've had a question about sex, dating, marriage, love, relationships, date, all the things, I've got a podcast about it, for sure.
She sure does.
And if you have any questions, you can also find me, DM me on all the things. It's all at Sex with Emily.
Also, she has a really famous masterclass that she did.
The platform, the masterclass platform. Learn from the world's best.
The world's best, and
I was
she's
like,
on
I'm
there.
the bestest. That happened. I was like, oh God, that's a lot of pressure in the bedroom. Jesus. But yeah, you can check that out too. My masterclass on sex. That's true. A lot of other things coming soon.
Yeah.
Check it.
Right, and they both, Darin and Emily, both handed in their new book like this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's amazing.
How about that, man?
So thank you guys.
Hey,
And
first, let's give it up to the bold
thank
and beautiful.
wow.
What about you, Jen? What's your takeaway from the book?
What's my
the one
takeaway?
bold exercise people can do tonight?
They have a
What's your
workbook.
favorite thing in here?
What's your bold that you can do
She's
tonight?
got bold moves. Get it? Bold
I do.
moves.
I have a lot of bold moves, but you got to get the book and see
Okay,
for
get the
yourself.
book.
There's a
Don't-
workbook in
we're
the
not
book.
telling you.
Yeah, and it's basically a blueprint for people who want to be bolder in their lives. It's very actionable. It's very practical, and you can integrate it today. So pick one up if you haven't had a chance yet to. So that's it.
Woo!
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for watching Habits and Hustle. Please watch another video here and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already by pressing the button below.
Hosted by Jennifer Cohen. Visionaries, tune in, you can get to know 'em. Be inspired, this is your moment. Excuses, we ain't having that. The Habits and Hustle podcast, powered by Happiness.